So here we're looking at J. Glenn Gray's The Idea of Death and Existentialism. And it's not the easiest essay. There's a lot of references to German philosophers Karl Jaspers and Martin Heidegger. And especially the Heidegger quotes and references are a little bit obscure, but I think that we can certainly make sense of this essay and get what we need to get out of it. Existentialism. Gray talks in the beginning about existentialism as a mood and a metaphysics. I'd like to talk a little bit about that. Metaphysics is the attempt to describe reality. And one may say that we're doing that a lot in life without knowing that we're doing metaphysics. So specifically, what does it mean to try to describe reality? Well, to try to describe reality in its most fundamental aspects, to answer the question, what is real? What is the universe composed of? And one's metaphysics is really generally one's assumptions about what is real or what reality is like. In the beginning of this essay, Gray mentions a great philosopher, I believe from the 17th century, 1600s, Spinoza, as a contrast in the metaphysical outlook to the existentialists. And, according to Spinoza, no expert on Spinoza's philosophy, metaphysics at all, but the picture that's painted there is that reality is okay, man. Okay, reality is what is, and you are part of what is. And according to a very ancient tradition in philosophy of a certain sort, what is cannot be what is not. So be assured that if you are, you always will be. So then the question is, what exactly are you? Because of course the body dies, but something else must be eternal, have true being. That sort of metaphysical outlook, says Gray, really discounts any discussion of death. As Spinoza says, a free man thinks of death, not at all. Because death is really not a concern. Death is not real, because whatever is cannot unbecome or not be. So death is a kind of an illusion. Well, that's a certain metaphysical outlook about what is real. And one might say that a certain mood of confidence or assurance comes from that metaphysical outlook. Well, what is different about the existentialist metaphysical outlook and its mood? If we look beginning of the essay on page 114, Gray writes about the existentialists. He says, they assert emphatically that a proper understanding of and right attitude toward death, one's own death, is not only a sine qua non, that is, an absolutely essential ingredient of genuine experience, but also of gaining any illumination about the nature of the world. So we can tell right away this is a very different outlook, and one in which death is a very important concept and a very, very important experience, one might say, in not only living a certain way, but in gaining truth about reality, about the world. So what is that reality, supposedly, about the world? To gain a knowledge of, we have to be aware of death. We have to think about death and really have to think about our own death. That's a very important aspect, I think, of this whole thing, is that much of our discussion of death is phony, is false, is a kind of an evasion of what deep down we know to be the truth about death. I think if we look at the discussion of Karl Jaspers' idea of the boundary situations and the idea of shipwreck, we may get a notion both of the metaphysics and the mood of existentialism, as Gray sees it, at least. That mood or that metaphysics, I think that the concept of nothingness is right there. That is, and this is something that we can always sort of look back on what Hans Jonas said about nothingness, about death always being there. I think that's very, very helpful, actually, because what Jaspers and Heidegger in different ways seem to be saying is an awareness of death, awareness of our own potential and inevitable death, is part of life, and not only is something that's really there, but an awareness of its reality. The reality of our own death makes life better in a way. This idea of the boundary situations, page 117, describing this, Gray says, only through the convulsion of our normal state of being can we reach the salvation of existenz. That's Jaspers' German word describing a certain state of being, and overcome the original sin of merely vegetating in the everyday world. That is, I think that's a very big theme here, is that, as he says later, or maybe on the same page, page 117, we are chiefly creatures of comfort, not seekers of truth. And that is a very big message here, that we don't always want to face the truth. I mean, we want to be comfortable. We want things to be nice and pleasant, and death is not a subject for casual conversation, and maybe not for any conversation. People just don't talk about it, and there are probably very good reasons for it. But our avoidance of that is a mistake and a kind of a weakness on our part, and we're sort of letting ourselves down, I think, is the existentialist message. If we don't not constantly talk about death, but become aware of it, make it part of our consciousness. Why? Well, Jaspers indicates something, or Gray says something about Jaspers' philosophy on page 118. He says, our true condition, that is the true human condition, is one of exposure. In reality, we are defenseless, naked to the winds of chance and blind accident. That is, although we seek safety and comfort, this German notion of Geborgenheit, safety and security, that is, as Gray says, a profound illusion. Our actual state and condition as human beings is one of exposure, of defenselessness. And although we may try to sort of build up kind of phony defenses, that is our true condition, and this notion that nothingness, that we are faced constantly with the prospect of nothingness by being mortal beings, and also that the world around us, reality, is not really as secure, one might say, as someone like Spinoza might want to say that it is. And I think perhaps the key here is the notion of time. We are temporal beings. We are beings that are constantly sort of going into the future. In that sense, we're temporal. We have a past, we have a present, we have a future in some sense. We are constantly facing the future, or constantly changing. In that sense, we're temporal beings, we're in time. But we're also temporary beings. That is, we're beings who exist for a time and then don't exist. And it is this prospect of non-existence that seems to be the real message here. So let's do a couple more videos. Let's expand a little bit upon this notion of Geborgenheit, the way that we seek safety, and let's ask really what we're supposed to get out of this so-called being towards death, or this awareness of our own inevitable deaths.